Hi, I'm Jeff Johnston. I'm here with the Daily Citizen, and I'm with Elizabeth Loening, who is going to tell us a little bit about her incredible story to Jesus and a little bit about some of the ministry she does. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. So great to see you.
Yeah, we've known each other a few years now, so it's just great to have you here. Elizabeth is from Redding, California.
That's right.
Why don't you start out just by telling us a little bit about your story, how you came to the Lord, what your background is?
Okay. Well, today I'm a pastor at a church in Northern California. But growing up, I questioned my sexuality and came out as a lesbian when I was in my early 20s. But grew up Christian, was part of the Presbyterian Church USA, and eventually went to seminary openly gay. And when I graduated from seminary, entered into parish ministry. And it was really in that context that I had, maybe you'd call it an encounter with Jesus, or at least an unexplainable experience of the Lord that caused me to begin questioning what I believed and what I believed about God. It didn't convict me about my sexuality. It convicted me really of unbelief.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that experience. You're from a Presbyterian background, but you have this encounter with the Lord.
An encounter. That's such an odd word.
Yes.
But essentially, I was met by, so I went to a youth gathering. So I was a youth pastor. I went to a gathering in another church. And in that setting, a young man approached me saying he felt like he had heard something from God for me. And so in that interchange with him, he proceeded to tell me some things that had been part of my prayer life for years. And in the middle of that experience, I found myself thinking, is it possible that God knows me specifically? Because if he does, I don't think I know who God is. And here I am with a master's in theology, beginning full-time ministry, and having this moment of concern and uncertainty about my faith and what I believed. And so it began for me a journey. And that journey ultimately led to me letting go of lesbian identity, repenting, embracing my womanhood, kind of pursuing God for a biblical understanding of sexuality. Ultimately, I got married to my husband. We are about to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And over the course of several years, it wasn't like instantly, but over the course of several years, I've experienced a pretty dramatic shift in my sexual identity and my sexual feelings and how that's worked out. And so today, lesbian identity, same-sex sexuality is really a very, very small part of my life.
Now, we're told from the media, from the academic world, that it's impossible to leave homosexuality and that it's damaging to try to do so. And there's even laws in different states where you're not allowed to help a minor leave homosexuality or live out his Christian faith when he has same-sex attraction. What were, say, 2 or 3 key elements for you that help bring healing and wholeness?
Well, I mean, one of the most important things that happened to me in the midst of this journey, because I would say, I've been on this years-long faith journey that really hasn't specifically been focused on my sexuality,
Yeah.
but more specifically focused on my life in Christ. But one of the most important things that happened to me in that journey was my relationship with the Lord and my prayer life opened up to scrutiny of the formative experiences of my life. So I found myself going, who am I really, right? And what can you tell me about my life? And I began kind of realizing that there were a lot of factors that influenced my sense of identity and who I was, not just my sexual identity. And then I started unpacking and realizing developmental or formative relationships, formative factors that could explain why I was the way I was, including my sexual desires. And so, I mean, I think one of the most important I think one of the most important things for someone to do when they experience same-sex attraction is to begin questioning, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean? And not majoring on this overly simplistic, this is just how I am, but allowing yourself to question and percolate and form an understanding that is as complex as you are.
Yeah, I know you've written about how many of us who have struggled with identity, masculinity, femininity, sexuality, we know some of the factors that help steer us different directions, and it's dealing with those things. And for you, a lot of that was through prayer and time with Jesus.
Yeah, major. I mean, a lot of time with the Lord just in reflection, because I mean, I'm a quiet person, and I also have a long history in the mental illness world. Like I was diagnosed early in my life with um, bipolar dis bipolar disorder, and so out of that, went to a lot of secular counseling, and so as I came to the Lord, I moved away from the counseling world and began seeking the Lord on my own for understanding. None of the secular counseling that I pursued ever allowed me to question why I had sexual desires that I had, and never encouraged me to put pieces together to understand how sexual harassment and sexual abuse and then this kind of disconnect with friends and family had all kind of come together to shape how I related to people and why I sexualized some relationships and not others. And so my prayer life came into my previous understanding of everything that I'd learned through counseling and added this extra bit of wisdom for me to begin sorting out some of the points of pain in my life that I'd never been allowed to open up before.
So eventually, you got involved in ministry to people struggling with different sexual issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I moved to California from the Midwest with my husband, we became involved in a large church. And in that context, I met someone for the first time with a similar past as mine. And as we got together and shared our background and our life experiences, we began realizing that there was actually a lot of wisdom that we carried. And so, out of my relationship with Ken Williams, a good friend, we decided to create a ministry called Equipped to Love. And Equipped to Love was really focused on helping churches provide spaces for people to follow Jesus wholeheartedly while maintaining a kind of an orthodox biblical sexual ethic.
That ministry, Equipped to Love, some of your focus began to change more to the policy world. So you have this individual story, you have your ministry experience, but then things started happening in California that required a response from the church. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So about a year after Ken and I had started doing this ministry together, um, then California tried to pass what essentially is a conversion therapy ban, but it would have expanded really largely beyond minors. Most therapy bans in the US are just focused on children. This therapy ban would have basically caused or called any resource or any service that suggested sexual orientation could change, would call it fraud. And so, for example, a few years ago, Ken published his memoir. Well, because it documents his testimony and then some of the approaches that he took with that, we probably wouldn't have been able to sell it in the state of California or offered consulting or any of those things. And so we saw that as a problem and began helping or assisting the opposition to that bill in the Capitol in California. And as we showed up, we ended up getting swept into sharing our testimonies in the Capitol, in the different committee hearings, which I often think, okay, I was never really public about my testimony of once identifying as a lesbian and then just becoming a normal married woman. Um, until I did it in the California Capitol, which was pretty challenging, and it required a lot of courage. But anyway, so we were testifying in one of the hearings, and you could tell that the assembly members were just looking at us like we had 3 heads, because hardly anyone gets to hear testimonies of people who have left LGBTQ culture in those categories. And so, driving home, we thought, "What can we do?" And we decided we would publish a book of testimonies. And so we published a book of very short testimonies of our friends. They were like 500-word testimonies, and we called the book Changed. So Changed essentially was a provocation against this bill, and said very succinctly what we were about. We brought that book, that is called the Changed book, to the Capitol and handed it out to all of the offices, or as many who would meet with us. And then we did a rally on the Capitol steps. And in the rally, we shared our testimonies very briefly, and California Family Council ended up live streaming that rally. Well, that live stream then kind of went viral, and we started hearing from people from across the world who would say, "That's also my story." So we had all these Me Too stories coming to us, and we ended up kind of with a movement. And so Change today is an international network of people who have left LGBT culture and those identities to follow Christ.
It's interesting because Focus on the Family got involved in that battle as well, because we know that churches and ministries that talked about leaving homosexuality, we would not have been able to sell our products and books and resources, or probably even offer them on the internet in California. And a lot of pastors and churches rose to the challenge and came alongside of you. And full disclosure, I'm in the Changed book. My story is in there. And where can people find the Changed book if they want to check out some of those tests? And I know you have online testimonies too, but where can people go for that?
Yeah, on our website, Changed Movement, that's past tense, changedmovement.com. You can go to our resources menu, and down, there's a link to order the book. We continue to publish more and more stories. And so we publish, I don't know how many hundreds of stories we have on our website now, but we continue to just publish the stories that are submitted to us. And we're on now our 4th edition of the Changed book.
And you have remained involved in public policy work, especially for the last few years. What are some of the kinds of things you're talking about in the policy arena right now?
Yeah, mainly, I'm mostly concerned about freedom of conscience, that people with this life experience of questioning their sexuality continue to have choices in how they steward their sexuality, whether they choose to identify as LGBT, or whether they, like me, choose not to embrace that culture and want to live out a born-again identity. And so Changed finds itself in committee hearings just like the ones we were in California, um, speaking against bans on therapy, or helping others kind of find resources or find connections, when bans have been put in place. For example, in Australia, Canada, Europe, there are places where it's illegal to share the gospel fully with someone who identifies as LGBT. And so for those individuals who find themselves with these feelings but yet don't want to embrace that culture, we help connect them to churches, or we connect them to legal entities that can work with them to protect their freedoms.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you're a 15-year-old Christian boy. You struggle with same-sex attractions. Maybe you're looking at pornography and you want help to stop because you want to live according to your faith. In many states, it's illegal for licensed mental health workers to help that 15-year-old boy, even though he wants help to change his identity and possibly attractions and change his behavior, certainly, if he doesn't want to keep on looking at pornography. So that's become a big issue in a lot of states. And as you said, it's international as well. Um, how do you navigate? You're doing policy work and you're ministering to individuals. How do you kind of navigate those two worlds?
Yeah, and well, so thankfully, maybe by God's wisdom, there are two of us. So Ken Williams and I are both founders of Changed. And Ken loves to focus on the church equipping side or the support or peer counseling side, and I kind of enjoy the more cultural engagement side and really theology, helping the church grapple with and understand how to engage culture. And so we have this natural separation between the two of us. So we continue to have a team that will go into churches and offer guidance, consulting, and even equipping on how to offer discipleship to people with this life experience, while I kind of go off and help with different types of legislation.
And you can go to the Changed website and find Ken's book, position papers, resources that explain some of these issues. You're also involved in an event that's coming up in a few weeks in June in California.
Yeah, we're just about to celebrate our 7th year anniversary. So seven years ago is when we were on the Capitol steps in California. So we're going to revisit the Capitol. We're going to share our testimonies from the Capitol steps. We're going to talk about AB 2943, which was the legislation we were opposing. And the fruit of our event, or the fruit of our endeavor, partnered with so many other churches and organizations in California, was that that bill actually never passed. And so we want to show up again in the California Capitol in the midst of so much controversy and polarization in the US on gender identity and on LGBT issues, to say, please, California, continue to protect freedom of conscience for all people. So we'll be sharing testimonies and going and speaking with legislators. And then the day before, on June 11th, so June 12th is the rally, on June 11th, we'll be doing an afternoon of education talking about gender ideology and its impacts. And we'll do a little bit having to do with science and ideological capture, really, of scientific research, and then why it's important for Christians to continue engagement on the gender ideology issue.
And you're doing that with California Family Council, which is one of our allies. They're a state-based policy group that fights for religious freedom, free speech, marriage, and family. So they've been affiliated with us for a lot of years. So you're doing that with them. You've had to travel. You travel to DC and tell your stories. You're here in Colorado Springs. How are you guys financed?
All donor based. Okay. So thankfully, we have since we have such a diverse view, right? So we get to care for the individual who is questioning their sexuality, and we get to defend that person's rights. And so we get to reach a really broad audience of people who might want to donate to our cause. The bottom line is we're trying to protect First Amendment rights for everybody, including those who would never leave LGBTQ culture.
People can go to your website and donate as well if they want to support the work you're doing.
Yeah, we have a giving link that you can follow. And right in the moment where our campaign is focusing on financing our June 11th and 12th event. And so you can go to our website, and we have a banner across the top linking to our dedicated webpage that will give all the details of what we're doing and our progress as we try to raise funds, because we're bringing in special speakers to be a part of the educational time, but then also helping others be able to attend, and then the cost of the venues and other things. So we're raising for that.
And any of our viewers who want to could attend the educational forum, go out to Sacramento, and they could attend that, and then the rally the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last question. You mentioned that you have hundreds of testimonies on your website, on the Changed website. Do you see it turning? Are you hopeful? Is there revival happening and coming within the LGBT community and within the broader group of people that struggle with sexual and relational brokenness? What do you think the Lord is doing right now?
Oh, I absolutely think the Lord is moving among the LGBTQ population, and in sovereign and powerful ways. I'm hearing testimonies of people who have never been to church and suddenly are being encountered by Jesus, or who might come to church one time under protest of parents, for example, and have a dramatic experience of the Lord's love. The one thread that runs through all the testimonies is the power of the love of Jesus. And as I watch the Lord visit people who are in the gay community, I just think, wow, there's a love. I don't want to call it a love revolution, but in a time when love is love, what we're all experiencing is the love of Jesus trumps everything and is worth following him for.
Wow. Thanks for ending on a positive note and giving us some hope. Again, I'm Jeff with the Daily Citizen, and this is Elizabeth Loning with the Changed Movement. Thanks for watching.